Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and today we're gonna be watching Caesar versus Ariovistus. So we kind of watched this, last on Friday, wait a minute, 58 BC, okay good. But point is, we watched this on Wednesday through Caesar, through Kings and Generals, so once again, we're gonna be watching this through as told by Historia Civilis. And I really like overall how Historia Civilis covers battles. Obviously, you know, watching Kings and Generals and Epic History TV, you know, like, their coverage are kind of like, I guess, the gold standard of showing battles on historical battles, but, you know, I think Historia Civilis, while he shines more in the political aspect, he still does a really good job. Plus, these are really early videos, so obviously, I can only assume he gets better, right? As he perfects his craft, and will be, as we watch more of his later videos down the line. So, yeah, overall, you know, we kind of saw what happened. Ariovistus, basically trying to block Caesar, but Caesar, being the genius he is, just makes a second camp, and then allows his supply lines to get back on because Ariovistus didn't fully commit to stopping him, due to religious reasons. You know, basically that's how Kings and Generals put it. We'll see how Historia Civilis put it. So I'm really excited, guys. I'm really liking this jumping back to back, covering two series at the same time. Obviously, probably my most ambitious undertaking after the Napoleon Epic History TV coverage, where I, like, did it for every day for a month. So, you know, this is pretty cool. I'm really liking this. And, yeah, overall, I just really love learning about Gaius Julius Caesar. Have you guys watched the Rome HBO series? There's like an announcer every time the Roman news comes up, and he's always doing these weird hand movements. Especially when he says Julius Caesar's name, he's like, Julius Caesar. I don't know, I'll put a clip right here so you guys know what the heck I'm talking about, so I don't look crazy.
Gaius Julius Caesar! Gaius Julius Caesar!
But, yeah, overall, I might just be doing that from now on. So, get ready. So yeah, I don't really have much else to add. Let's just get right into it. Let me put on my shades. Good. So, if you want to watch this original video without me talking, or my little bubble here, or me pausing the talk, the original video is always down in the description down below. I feel like I'm really good at doing that. And yeah, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's watch Caesar versus Ariovistus, 58 BCE.
Shortly after Caesar's victory over the Helvetii, he received a barrage of messages from Gallic tribes, thanking him for dealing with the invaders and congratulating him on his victory. They then asked if they could come and see him in person. It was all quite mysterious, and they insisted that everybody take an oath of secrecy before the meeting. Once face to face, they told Caesar about a German king named Ariovistus. Apparently, Ariovistus had been invited across the Rhine by some Gallic tribe to intervene in a dispute, and had just started to gobble up territory for himself. He then began to bring large numbers of Germans across the Rhine in an effort to colonize his new territory. He now had 120,000 Germans living in Gaul, with plans to bring more. As a cherry on top, Ariovistus had also attacked Rome's closest ally in Gaul, and had forced them to disavow their treaty with the Romans, and to provide an annual tribute to Ariovistus instead. Nobody in Gaul was happy about this. The Gauls then got to the point of this secret meeting. They formally asked Caesar to intervene on their behalf. Caesar agreed to meet with Ariovistus to see if he could get him to moderate his behavior. I don't want to make it sound like Caesar was doing this for altruistic reasons. A law had been passed in 61 BCE instructing all governors of Transalpine Gaul to protect Rome's Gallic allies whenever they were able. In other words, Caesar had a mandate from Rome to act on this if he wanted to. But even more to the point, Ariovistus was encroaching on Rome's sphere of influence, and doing nothing in response would do some real damage to Rome's credibility in the region. Caesar sent a message to Ariovistus, asking for a meeting on neutral ground. Ariovistus wrote back, saying, "No, if you want to meet, come to me." Obviously, negotiations were off to a great start. Caesar sent a second message, reminding Ariovistus that Caesar had been the one to legitimize his rise to power during his year as consul. This was a not-so-veiled threat. He was saying, I made you. I could easily unmake you. Caesar then listed his demands.
First, he instructed Ariovistus to immediately stop bringing Germans across the Rhine.
Second, he instructed him to return all of his Gallic hostages. Third, he told him to immediately cease all military activity.
Ariovistus sent a simple reply.
He said that the Romans were free to run their conquests as they saw fit, and so was he.
Oh my
Cheeky.
gosh.
Around the same time, Caesar also received 2 pieces of intelligence. First, he got word that Ariovistus had mobilized an army and was marching on his neighbors again. Second, he started to get reports of hundreds of thousands of Germans on the other side of the Rhine, preparing for a crossing. This was getting serious.
Caesar gathered his men and set off towards Ariovistus.
On the march, he got word that the German army was moving towards a town called Byzantio. This was bad. This town was well fortified, and Caesar wasn't interested in continuing negotiations with a guy behind strong walls, much less conducting a siege if it came to that. He left his supply wagons behind, and pushed his men forward at a breakneck pace, marching all day and all night, and arriving in Byzantio just before the Germans could reach it. He stayed there for several days, allowing his men to rest while his supply wagons caught up. When he was ready, Caesar marched out and closed in with Ariovistus' army. He sent messengers to set up a face-to-face meeting.
Ariovistus had some specific ground rules for the meeting.
He asked that exactly 10 men on horseback accompany each general. Caesar had cavalry, but they all happened to be Gauls, so fearing some sort of trap or betrayal, he had some of his most loyal infantry mounted on Gallic horses. This led to some of his men joking that he was treating them so well that he made them into equitae. If you don't get the joke, it's a pun. Equitae means both horsemen and a wealthy Roman. So the 2 generals and their retinues met on an open field. Caesar simply reiterated what he had told Ariovistus in his letter. He demanded that no more Germans cross the Rhine, that the Gallic hostages be returned, and the cessation of all military activities. Ariovistus said that this was now his province, just as Transalpine Gaul was Caesar's province. He said that he and the Romans had won their respective provinces through conquest, fair and square.
Ariovistus then leveled a threat,
saying that many politicians back in Rome would probably be overjoyed if he killed Caesar right now.
You know, that's kind of, yeah, when kings and generals said that, it's kind of funny because of how true that statement is, how a lot of the Roman and the Republic were seeing just how Julius Caesar was rising and the enemies he was making, you know, through his political maneuverings, that, yeah, they would be happy if Julius Caesar died, you know? A lot would, so it's funny because Ariovistus is kind of right on the money with that. And, you know, I have to say, Julius Caesar's being so, like, diplomatic. Like, I know a lot of people kind of remember Julius Caesar for his ruthlessness and, you know, obviously what people would call the genocide of the cult. I think genocide's the operative word. That's what most people say, at least, when referring to it. But, yeah, here he's being so reasonable. He's like, hey, he's trying to set up like 5 meetings, and he's just stating what's already there. But in a weird way, Ariovistus is also making a lot of sense. He's like, hey, you conquered, I'm conquering, we're not different, you know? Which is true, you know, back then, here in this era, it's just people conquered stuff, you know? And I guess just the strongest were legitimized, like Alexander the Great, or Rome, for example. So he's like, hey, I'm just doing what you've done. So, I don't know, it makes sense. Like, Ariovistus is obviously being, like, unreasonable as heck, but there is some, like, I don't know, weird truth, I think, to what he's saying, if that makes sense. I don't know. I forgot. It's been, like, a week since I watched the Kings and Generals Ariovistus versus Caesar video. Like, I record these a long time ahead, so by the time you see this, I'll already be weeks ahead. we're not watching this at the real time, by the way. But Yeah, I think he mentioned, like, what, did Ariovistus talk to Rome or something? Like, there was something I think he may have had a deal, or was that someone else? I'm getting my dates or people mixed up, but either way, I don't know, we'll find out.
Damn. This comment caused a fight to break out between the horsemen. Caesar would say that the Germans started it, but he would say that, wouldn't he? Caesar immediately broke off negotiations and had his men return to camp.
A few days later, Ariovistus sent another message,
saying that he was interested in another meeting. Caesar was understandably suspicious, considering how the last one ended.
Yeah, Caesar sends in one of his, I think a messenger or someone for him, and they just capture him and kill him, I think. So, yeah, that was smart of Julius Caesar to be like, yeah, no, we're not meeting. Oh man, Ariovistus, man, he's wilding, dude.
He sent his favorite Gallic interpreter to go and see what Ariovistus wanted.
It's a good thing he did, because in fact it was a trap.
Ariovistus took Caesar's interpreter prisoner,
and would spend the next several days arguing with his religious advisors over whether or not they should burn him alive as a religious sacrifice.
Oh my gosh.
Braden has...
Ariovistus mobilized his army,
and in a surprise move marched all the way around Caesar's position and encamped on a hill behind him.
This put him in a good position to intercept Caesar's grain shipments.
You know, this when we were covering this through the Kings and Generals video, I was thinking like this was really kind of bold, but it almost seemed like it would have worked. But when Julius Caesar decided to make the second camp and essentially reestablish his supply route, you know, apparently, like, as he explained it, Ariovistus didn't fully commit to stopping the establishment of that second supply line, mainly because, you know, during religious festival or, you know, religious reasons. And, yeah, again, like I said, who knows if he had actually, like, fully committed. Sorry, I was looking at something. So, yeah, like, if he had committed, I wonder if it would have worked or been more successful. Again, the great what-ifs of history, right?
Not great for Caesar. Ariovistus was leading an army of around 30,000,
and Caesar had somewhere around 25,000.
Caesar and Ariovistus both deployed for battle
5 days in a row. There was the occasional cavalry skirmish, but no outright attack. Caesar was now under pressure to attack before he ran out of food.
And with Ariovistus holding the high ground, this was a recipe for disaster.
So Caesar came up with a plan. He marched his army out of his camp in 3 columns, leaving a small garrison behind. He then marched just beyond the German hill.
Ariovistus saw what he was doing,
and sent out his cavalry and half of his infantry in response. Why only half? We'll get to that in a minute. Caesar had expected a German response, which is why he had his men in 3 columns rather than 1. He instructed 2 columns to turn and hold the Germans off, while the third one began to construct a fortified encampment.
There was some skirmishing back and forth, but Ariovistus never really pushed in a coordinated attack, even though the Romans were out in the open and undeniably vulnerable.
When the third line completed its construction, the Romans pulled back, and the Germans didn't pursue. Caesar was now in a position where he could intercept his food shipments unmolested, which meant that he could take his time figuring out how to deal with Ariovistus.
Yep.
The next day was pretty
Yeah, again, Ariovistus' biggest problem, obviously, you know, the religious stuff, hindered him, but, yeah, like, again, he arguably should have been more aggressive and committed fully to stopping Caesar, because, again, like, he put Caesar in a really rough spot here, stopping his, you know, supply line, so, yeah, overall, this was a big blunder on his part.
Uneventful, but late in the day, the Germans sent a raiding party to attack the first Roman camp, but Caesar had left a garrison and they were easily repulsed. During this engagement, some German prisoners were captured.
Under questioning, they revealed that Ariovistus had been told by his religious advisors
that victory was impossible until the next full moon. Aha! That explains why he was being so cautious. Caesar decided to take full advantage of this. The next day, he marched his army straight up the hill.
And Ariovistus did not challenge him.
Oh no.
Now both armies were on the hill. Caesar then deployed for battle, so close to the German camp that they had no choice but to fight. If you remember back to when Caesar fought the Helvetii, he had kept his 2 inexperienced legions in reserve at all times. Here, for the first time, he put them up front, which is a sign of their growing competence.
As Ariovistus' army prepared for battle,
Caesar observed that the Germans on the Roman right looked a little weak. That's where he positioned himself, and that's where he intended to win the battle. All of a sudden, the Germans attacked with amazing speed. It all happened so fast that the Romans didn't even have time to throw their javelins. They just had to drop them where they stood. Caesar ordered his first 2 lines forward, and kept his 3rd in reserve.
Ariovistus fought with some pretty unusual tactics, which are worth getting into here.
His infantry and cavalry coordinated very closely, and were organized in mixed groups of 100. The infantry acted as a solid wall, similar to a phalanx, while the cavalry would hide behind them and launch hit-and-run attacks, coming back to regroup when needed. Each group acted independently, which meant that there were hundreds of hits and runs going on at the same time. It was extremely frustrating to deal with. As the battle dragged on, the Roman frustration started to show. Some dealt with the German walls of infantry by throwing themselves into them, and ripping away the enemy's shields with their bare hands. I ain't never seen that in a movie.
I know,
After
right?
some effort, Caesar was able to break through on the Roman right, just as he had planned. But with all of his attention devoted here, he was unaware that at the same moment, the Roman left was beginning to crumble. The commander of the Roman cavalry, Publius Licinius Crassus, son of Caesar's political ally, saw what was happening and launched into action. On his own accord, he went to the Roman third line, who were totally oblivious, and ordered them to come and reinforce the Roman left. The third line got there just in time, and the left held. This was an early example of the growing initiative of Caesar's subordinates, which would turn out to be a feature of the Gallic Wars. Soon afterwards, the German collapse on the right reverberated throughout the entire army. The Germans fell apart and fled. They continued their retreat all the way back across the Rhine, pursued by a horde of angry Gauls. Those hundreds of thousands of Germans waiting to cross the Rhine heard news of this defeat and went home. As luck would have it, after the battle, Caesar's favorite Gallic interpreter was found alive, but traumatized by the constant conversations about being burned alive. Caesar would later say that discovering that he was alive gave him as much pleasure as the victory itself.
Oh.
With these back-to-back victories over first the Helvetii and then Ariovistus, Caesar would later say that he won 2 wars in a single summer. Rome was now well established as an indispensable power broker in the region. Caesar left his army in Gaul under the command of Labienus for the winter, and returned to his provinces to tend to his duties as governor. He'd be back next spring.
Awesome. So yeah, overall, man, Julius Caesar, I like you're kind of seeing the rise and the power of his army, because like Julius Caesar by the end had probably one of the best fighting forces like in the world, so it's really cool to see that. And yeah, Ariovistus really screwed up, huh? Mainly with not fully committing to stopping Caesar when he may have had a better chance when he was trying to make it. Again, not guaranteed he would have won, but I think he would have had a much better chance, right? And yeah, overall I really like this. Straight to the point. Covered mainly some of the same beats as Kings and Generals, added some more. And yeah, that's kind of it. So I'm gonna jump to now Kings and Generals right now, and that video will come out on Wednesday. So bye everyone.